I am seeing us, Brooke, on my second screen, which means that we are live for this
Woohoo!
conversation today, which I feel like is a long time coming, if I'm being honest. I feel like this has been building over the last 2+ years, and I'm very excited to officially, have this conversation, be able to have it live and recorded, answer questions, and talk all things. I don't want to call it work-life balance because it's such a cliche word for it, but I know we're going to get into the topic, all of that. But I'm excited and thank you for working, to make this work and for us to be able to connect today.
Yeah, always great to chat with you, Alec. Happy to be here.
Yeah. Well, as people are joining, I know we're just 1 minute past the top of the hour. If you are joining, you are in the right place. One, because Brooke is fantastic and is worth the price of admission. It was free if you are here, but absolutely worth being here on your Wednesday. This is Getting Unstuck, how work has changed and what you can do about it. And I think our goal for this conversation, Brooke, and I know we're going to have a handful of these as we move forward throughout this process and kind of I think there's so much to unravel here, is really to just talk about what it's like today as an individual with some of those glimmers into the employer employee relationship and how we can take back a little bit of control as human beings in today's workforce. And so as you're joining, I just want to let everybody know that, as you can see, this is a live conversation. You can ask questions of us, add comments, add feedback. All you have to do is throw that in the comment section on LinkedIn. I will be able to see those. I will bring it to the table. We can have that discussion right here and right now. And so if you have those throughout, please throw those in. And while you're here, let us know where you're watching from. If you've jumped in, I can see that there's 10, 15. Now we're up to 18 people in here right now. So if you are watching, let us know where you're watching from. And then we're going to go ahead and get started. How does that sound, Brooke?
Sounds great.
Okay. Well, before we just jump in and run, I'll introduce myself really quickly. I'll toss it to you and then we'll go. Alec McChesney, Score Marketing, Director of Business Development here. Really excited about this conversation, something that I have been really passionate about, I think, since leaving journalism and my time at newspapers and kind of understanding what it was for me to be in the work world and like having the pressure of a day-to-day basis. And I know you'll introduce yourself a little bit, but with the Velocity Advisory Group, started to open up our eyes a little bit more into some of the conversations that we need to have at the employer and at the employee level. So I'm excited to get into this. But Brooke, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself as well?
Sure. I'm Brooke Page Thompson. I'm a partner at Velocity Advisory Group. I've spent the last 20 plus years of my life in the consulting HR talent management space, and I oversee all of our delivery, business advisory, leadership development programs. I'm also a yoga and mindfulness teacher. So I love having conversations like this because it's this marriage of kind of the corporate world and then some of these things that we just inherently learn in the practice of mindfulness that you're like, this is simple stuff, right? And we should just do it. And so I'm really excited to share some concepts and ideas today.
I love it. Well, we've got a whole crew of people coming in here from Kearney and Columbus and Omaha and Lincoln and Kansas City. So, as a reminder, we're going to jump right into some preceded questions that we took in the lead up to this. But feel free, fire off questions in the comment section. Add discussion points. We'll bring those out. I think the question that I wanted to start with, and I know we talked about this kind of before going live, Brooke, is really this table set of how much work has changed and what changes we're expecting next. Like all of this is the basis of this conversation. But I'm intrigued at your thoughts at just level setting how work has changed from prior to COVID, during COVID, post COVID, and now we're in this post COVID, and this is the future. And so, what are your thoughts when I ask that question?
Yeah, it's fun to talk about this because it seems like it's a topic that never stays stable, right?
Yeah.
We're always talking about, oh gosh, things are changing. And, pre-COVID, I think everybody was on Mach 10 and, running everywhere. You were in an office, you were traveling all over the place and having all these conversations. And then COVID hit and everybody was just grateful to have a job, right? Even though they were from home. And then they were
Mm,
navigating all of these things of kids at school, right? Doing that from home. Their spouses were working in the same room with them. And then the work started to change because we were doing things more efficiently and faster at home.
yeah.
And then all of a sudden you had this wave come through that was like, it doesn't matter what hours you work, right? It's flexibility is what we want to provide to you. And so my working hours may be different than yours, and that's okay. And then we get to 2024, and it's like we forgot all the stuff that happened the last 3.5 years.
Mm,
And now what we're hearing from a lot of clients is, I don't know how to measure productivity anymore. I don't know how to make sure my people are actually doing their jobs. But then in engagement surveys, you hear from employees, I'm overworked. I have
yeah.
too much to do. And the real question is starting to come out of, well, is too much work 60 hours a week, which is the expectation of most executive teams,
Yeah.
or is too much work 45?
Right.
And I don't know who's supposed to define that, but what we're starting to see is people are like, but when I came into an office, I probably only worked 32-ish hours total a week if you marked it on a 40-hour work week, because I went to lunch with people and I had some commute stuff that I had to deal with. Now we figured out how to make it more efficient, and we're actually doing 40 hours of
Mm,
true work during the day or during the week.
yeah.
And we haven't slowed down the pace. And so we're giving people more because it's like, well, you should have more capacity. You're only working 40 hours.
Right.
I want you to be at 50 or 60. And people are like, I can't do any more because I have this full-time thing called a job. I have stuff happening in my family life. The
Hmm.
world seems to be kind of on fire right
Yeah.
now. And so I'm dealing with inflation. I'm dealing with my car broke down. I got to buy a new air conditioner for my house. My house flooded because, it rained too much. Like there's so many things compounding people right now that they're kind of like, I don't know what to do with all of this.
Hmm.
And I feel stuck because I'm being asked to do all these different things and all of them are priority.
Yeah.
So how do you really figure out what's priority? Well, you start to pull back on some things, and that's where we start to talk about fatigue, when people get fatigued, and we'll get into that later. But I think the work has just really changed from a mindset standpoint, and there's a really big gap forming between incoming work population and the population that's kind of running the business. And there's a really big disconnect on what does it mean to work today.
You've got me fired up 3 minutes into this, Brooke, because you hit on everything that we need to go into in more detail, from the sheer, difference in how we worked in that, 12 to 16, 18-month period of COVID, and you were working with children at home and your spouse and the roommates and all of these things, all the way through to like measuring productivity and how do we balance that as employers. And then I even think there's some of this is like, what is the employer responsible for versus what are the employee responsible for when it comes to those hours, and when those hours are completed and when those tasks are completed. And so there's so many, for all of the good points you made there, I had, equally as many questions. I think the two that kind of stood out right away, two comments that you made, was one about the fatigue and one about the being stuck, and I think those go hand in hand. And in our prep call, I kind of mentioned that the word that I've been hearing a lot lately is exhaustion.
Yeah.
Exhaustion. I love my job. I feel really good about my job. I like the company that I'm at. I like the people I work with, but I'm exhausted. And it's not necessarily because of the amount of work or the quality of the work, but there's all of these other things going on. And I love sharing this example. I was in a leadership meeting a couple of months back, and people are noticing my face is going extremely sour. And it's because I'm in an argument with my neighbor about the storm that hit last night and the gutter that was going on. And it's like, it's pissing me off. Like, I'm
Yeah.
upset. And so it's like, well, how are you? How do you feel about work right now? And I didn't separate the two at that time, and that made me feel this type of way. So what does, and I'm going to ask you a really poor question, Brooke. This is just not, but I'm curious, when you think of the fatigue and stuck and exhaustion, what does that mean at the individual level, and how does that impact us? How does that impact the company? How does it impact the individual? And then we're going to dive into kind of what we can do about it, but just kind of looking at it as what does this mean and how does it impact us?
Yeah, it's a loaded question for sure, because it could go in a lot of different
Yeah.
directions. But I think what I noticed in particular about myself, because I will definitely say the exhaustion factor was high for me about 9 months ago.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not really that busy, am I? Like, I don't have that much work it's not different than it's ever been before. Why do
Right.
I feel this way? And I had to have a couple of months where I kind of sat with that and I was like, oh, this has been building.
Yeah.
This didn't happen overnight. This has been building for 3.5 years. And what happened was in the effort of, I really do believe in COVID, a lot of people slowed down
Yeah.
because we had to. But then you had people who are entrepreneurs, who had small businesses, who were still trying to make, dollars for their company work. They were on fire because all they could think about was all the what ifs,
Mm,
right?
mm,
Now imagine you've got kids and
yeah.
you've got all these other factors that are falling into it. And it's like, I got all of it. I got all of it, right? And then 2.5 years later, you're like, I have no energy. I can't function on a day-to-day basis and make sentences that make sense. I'm like neurologically not tracking things the same way. And when you really look at where you spend your energy and time, we talk a lot about this in mindfulness practices, right? Is where your energy goes. And I recognized I had 18 different big projects going on at the same time. And they all required the same amount of effort and energy. And then I was like, but none of them are moving and going anywhere. Why can't any of them like just go, right? Like
Right.
they're just stuck. I feel stuck. And what I recognized was I was asking myself to prioritize too many things. I actually had to learn how to say no and take myself out of some things that I had committed to, which was really hard for me.
Yeah.
And I started to recognize in my employees similar things were happening because at the top of velocity, we were ping ponging all over the place, right?
Right.
Like new ideas, let's try this, let's do this, let's build this. And conceptually it makes sense, but then when you give it people to do the work, they're like, well, wait a minute, you gave me something similar to this 6 months ago. Which one am I supposed to do?
Right.
Both.
Yeah.
That's impossible,
Hmm.
right? I need more staff. We don't have the budget for it. And so now people are just like, I mean, quiet quitting was definitely a thing, but I think what we're seeing now is this exhaustion in the system itself,
Yeah.
and people don't know how to make it stop. And
Yeah.
they feel like they have to commit to all these things when it's like, actually, as humans, we can't.
Yeah. Well, and then I think you add in, looking at the longevity of and just facing the facts of there's 30 more years of this, and there's such a lack of predictability right now. I mean, even and that's in the workforce, but also, my wife and I bought a house in 2021 and we're looking to upgrade. And you go for a day and you're like, this is miserable right now. Like the real estate agents are kind of like, "Huh, I wouldn't do this. Like,
Yeah.
and even them, like, and they're the ones trying to, and so it's like the lack of predictability,
Yeah.
let alone of the next 10 years, but of the next year, and the
Mhm.
changes that companies are making, and the pressure that is being put under individuals. I think it goes to this question of where does your energy go, and having that clarity, that you frankly, like, unfortunately, have to try to figure that out, and employers have to help with that. And so I think one of the questions that I had originally popped in here, and we already got this question within the LinkedIn chat from Jackie, is a really interesting question that I think is related to the choosing where your energy goes, not only at work, but then all of the other aspects of being a human being. Is balance, and that word balance, just right away, I'm like, I could feel it coming out. Is balance truly possible, or is it a constant state of trying to find balance and maybe having to accept that you're always going to be on that seesaw back and forth? What are your thoughts, Brooke, at Jackie's question there?
I think that we are always striving to find balance, and
Yeah,
it's going to ebb and flow based on where you currently are in your life.
yeah.
And that's hard because I know for myself, I have some months that I have great balance, and then everything gets turned on its head. And you're like, okay, I have to not have as much balance that I would like to have
Hmm.
because I need to take care of these other things, and they are important enough that I need to put my energy there. The difference is when we can't prioritize balance at all, and we're living in a constant state of fight or flight, right? We
Hmm.
talk about the amygdala, that fight or
Yeah,
flight response. That's where we start to see fatigue creep in, because we're draining all of the energy and resources that we need to use in the time we have balance to store up, so
right.
that we have enough to take it when we don't have as much balance. And what I'm seeing in the workforce and with a lot of my friends is many of us didn't take the pause when we were given the chance
Hmm.
to uh, refill that measure of what balance and energy looked like. We were already on empty.
Right.
And so you push, 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 push. And then all of a sudden you're like, why am I sick all the time?
Yeah.
My digestion's off. I have headaches all the time.
Hmm.
My body aches, right? Like we start to have signs that something's wrong.
Right.
And then you look at all the stuff that you need to do and you're overwhelmed with, well, I still need to do all these things. I've committed to them.
Hmm.
And the word, I always pick a word every year to kind of anchor to. And my word intentionally this year was pause, because in a meditation practice I run called Yoga Nidra, we use the pauses between the breaths to just be, right? There's nothing left to it. And what you find is life is lived in the pause.
Mm.
It's not lived when you're overscheduled. It's lived in the pause. So I always ask people, think about a time, like a memory you have where you're really happy. It probably was in an unscheduled moment where you were just there. What if you could prioritize those moments more than the ones where you feel completely out of sorts and all over the place? That's when the concept of balance doesn't really matter anymore, because you're intentionally creating space for what we would call a pause. We can do it at work, right? We can do it on our calendars. I need a mental break on Wednesdays between 2 and 4. And I tell my team, don't schedule anything in that time block, because I need that to actually refocus myself for the rest of the week. I turn my phone on do not disturb for very specific moments,
Yeah.
right? I actually intentionally don't have a device next to me as much as possible during the weekends, because I'm like, everybody I need to talk to is probably in my house.
Right.
Everything else can wait. And you start to prioritize how you view where you spend your time. Your level of balance will be different than mine. And I think that's a loop we get stuck in too, is you have people with high energy who just seem to be able to do everything with ease. I'm betting they struggle with this too.
Yeah.
But this aspect of needing to be at the same level as everybody else isn't right, because it's not what you need, it's what they need. And this perception of I have to keep up is what's going to create more and more of this concept of non-balance, and then fatigue starts to creep in. So
Yeah,
that was a
I
lot.
No, it was so good. I said it was going to be worth the price of admission. I think that answer what was fantastic, Brooke, and I thank Jackie for asking that question. There was a lot in there that I think we can pull out and talk about. But at the very end, you kind of said that one person's balance is different than another person's balance. And then you talked about this guy or this individual who's got high energy and it seems like they're all over the place, and that is me, and I can do that for weeks at a time. And
Mhm.
then there's a Thursday and the check engine light is on and the brakes are breaking and all this stuff. 4 years ago I would have said that's not a problem at all. I need a Red Bull, and I if
Yeah.
I go to the gym I will solve all of those problems. And then a week after that I am ill, right? Like I am out for the count. And so I do think to Jackie's question about the balance, I think the word that I have tried to reframe it in since especially leaving the Journal Star, where I had some real issues with overworking and migraines and throwing up at the office and just walking back to my desk,
Mm.
was the self-awareness of
Yeah.
like what I need is what I need. And if I can be, and this is like where you have to be honest with yourself, but if I could be as good at my job in the time period that I need to be,
Mhm.
other people will respect that, right? And I say that and I like have a hint of cautiousness because there's an employer out there, or there's an HR representative out there who's like, that's not how it works. Our company wouldn't do that, or our company wouldn't do this. But this concept of the 2 to 4 on a Wednesday, when you said it, in my head, I instantly went to, well, what if a client calls? What if a client says they could only meet on Wednesday to 2 to 4? And you just start to instantly negate that thought process. And so the guardrails that you have up fall right away, which then that balance is really hard. And I think the example that I'm using right now in my life is I have a really bad left knee. I tore my
Mhm.
meniscus recently. I've been coaching soccer for a while now, and I tore my meniscus, and the doctors are like, you probably just shouldn't coach soccer, right? Like, you just probably shouldn't do it. And I know I shouldn't anymore. And I've actually, since not doing it in the spring, had more time to myself, had more time with my wife and cooking, all this stuff. It's been good. It took me so long to tell the coaching staff that I could not continue forward because I have a literal medical problem that
Yeah.
will not let me coach. But the idea of breaking out of the of whatever it is, whatever view I've placed on myself within their eyes, all of these things, it took me a long time to be
Mhm.
able to craft that message when it's as simple as, hey, a doctor told me I probably shouldn't coach anymore because I've got a bum knee. Let's move on. Here's this, and go. But it's a really hard to address that internally
Mhm.
just with yourself. So then taking that balance or those guardrails or that self-awareness and now having to make it external facing to your boss, to your loved ones, to your friend, like whatever it is, just makes it that much harder.
It does. And I love that example because it's something that I think a lot of people actually struggle with
Yeah.
is I'm willing to compromise my physical health because I agreed to do something and now
Yep.
I feel obligated to keep that agreement in place. When there are people in the world that would be like, screw the commitment, my health is way more important, and they just
Yes.
do it, right? And then there's the rest of us is like, oh gosh, like I could never let them down. Oh, the kids that I'm coaching, I don't want to let them down. And it's like at some point you do have to start to evaluate is it worth it?
Yeah.
Right. And when you're
Yeah.
younger, sure, it's worth it, but then it compounds over time. And
Mm.
so I use this story a lot because it's a reminder for me too. In my one of my last jobs, it was in a good place. It was very toxic. I was grateful I had mindfulness to help me with that because I had to deal with a very um crazed boss who overscheduled herself, and it just had this compounding effect. And so it was constant barrage of you're not good enough or this isn't what I
Mm.
expected, and you just are like, I don't know how to deal with this. And I knew I needed to leave the job, but I just didn't, right?
Yeah.
Because I'd made a commitment, I was making good money, I didn't want, my ego was like, can't admit that you made a mistake. So I stayed, and 9 months later, I started getting an eye twitch.
Yeah.
2 months after that, I started getting heart palpitations. And then when I finally left, so that was like 14 months in, I left at month 15, I had a rash that
Yeah.
had developed. And I remember talking to my mom, and I was like, I don't understand all of this. And she's like, Brooke, you have been so stressed out the last 14 months. Your body's finally telling you, hey, you need to stop. And
Yeah.
had I kept going, that probably would have turned into something chronic
Mm-hmm.
that I couldn't get out of in the
Yeah.
future, because now my body was in fight or flight all the time.
Yeah.
And we get these signs all the time that we're like, when you're in flow, right? When you're doing a job that you love and you're like, oh, I could do this every day.
Yeah.
Everything just seems to work, right? Because your energy is flowing in a direction it's supposed to be going. When I'm like, oh, but wait, I'm going to go over here and do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, that's when it starts to get wonky and off kilter, because
Yeah.
what are you doing?
Okay, I've got a really interesting question for you because I love that story, and I have two of the same stories at the two previous stops that I made at before coming to SCORE. And I mean, one of them, I actually have "Democracy Dies in Darkness" on my arm because of how much I love the world of journalism, and like the idea of quitting that as I'm seeing a doctor and they're like, you either hate
Mhm.
your job or there's something really wrong and we need to do an EKG and an MRI, and it's like, oh, okay, I really hate my job, right? And the ego though was really hard. So I'm curious, there isn't a job that you're going to take that doesn't have stressors,
Mm-mm.
right? How do you balance the stress that's good and healthy and the day to day? Like, I like being stressed at work, I like challenges
Mhm.
with, oh my gosh, like this is actually a problem and I'm starting to see it impact how I treat my loved ones, how I treat strangers, and how it actually impacts me on a day-to-day basis. How do you think about that contrast between the two?
Yeah, I had to recognize when I left that job, because I was like, because it started right away,
Yeah.
right? And I was like, how did I get there that fast? I've had bad bosses before, but
Right.
this was like day one, right?
Yeah.
And I kind of sat with it for a little bit, and I was like, it's because I never truly sat down and asked myself, what do you actually need?
Mm,
And I never dealt with the stress that they were providing, because I was taking it all as mine to own. And I never really thought, what is Brooks to own versus what can I push back? And the minute I recognized that, I was like, I literally left one job at this and started the next one in the exact same place,
yeah.
because I hadn't dealt with the last thing. And I'm not talking about like going on a big spiritual retreat and having, like shamans pray over you or
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
This is like, you're going to sit down and ask yourself a couple core questions. What do you value?
Hmm.
What are you put here to do? We all have gifts, and we
Hmm.
should find jobs that use those gifts, right?
Yeah.
But if we don't know what they are, we just take jobs because they come along, and then 6 months later, you're like, I'm miserable because I hate what I'm doing.
Right.
Then you got to ask yourself, what boundaries do you have to put in place in order to not fall into the same traps again?
Right.
So for me, it was, I'm going to consciously try to find an employer who I can work for where I actually like the people.
Yeah.
I'm going to start to, in our world, we call it eagle up, right? And on disc, that's a high D. I
Yeah.
have none. And so I'm like, I need to eagle up a little bit, because I should be assertive. It's okay to say no.
Mm.
It's okay to push back. And actually, when you don't do it, you become the dumping ground.
Right.
And the more you practice these things, they don't happen overnight, but the more you practice them, it's like, now people know what I will and will not sign up for.
Hmm.
And I'm really clear on, the minute I can feel my tank is on its way down to E, I take 3 days off. and I either go to the mountains or I just stay home and do the things that refill my cup. Because I've learned over time, if I push through or I take a vacation and I work on my vacation, I come back in a worse place than when I left.
Right.
And you just
Right.
have to be mindful of that stuff. And you have to define what it is for you. I can't do it for you. Your employer can't do it for you.
Yeah.
You have to define it and then see if those align with what the expectations are of the job.
Yeah, it's such a good point, and also kind of a segue into that relationship between the employee and the employer, because I similar to you, I likened my path to SCORE as there was two other stops where
Mhm.
I was like, oh, everything's different now. I'm at a different company, and it was different for 6 months, and then I let myself get back to those problems that I was having, and so it's been for me like that recognition of, you asked a couple of those of those good questions in terms of like what do you need, and setting that for yourself, and what do you value, and what are your skill sets. One of the big questions for me was, when am I at my best?
Mhm.
And that question is in work. Like, when am I at my best in work? But what am I then doing around the clock that then makes it the best? And we talked about this on Monday, and I always make fun of myself. It's like, when I'm at my best, I am probably cooking myself. I am probably working out. And if I have 3 bad weeks in a row, all I have to do is look at the calendar and be like, yeah, I've worked out once in 21 days, and I've been eating random food. I had chips and crackers last night and some
Yep.
popcorn. Like,
Yep.
it's very clear to be able, like, that's helped me refocus a little bit to be able to say, when am I at my best? I know that my best creative thinking work happens from 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. And that's really weird. But if I get up, my wife hates this hoodie that I wear. If I get up and I put this hoodie on from 5 until 8 o'clock, and I'm laying on the couch and I put my headphones in, I can absolutely lock in. It does not matter if it's a proposal, if it's presentation, but that's the time that I can do that.
Mhm.
SCORE and Leah, especially Kate, Crystal, the whole team here, have helped me hone that in and said, that's good. We want you. That's why you're here, is that best version. So if it's from 5 to 8, and then you take from 11 until 1 to take a walk and walk with the dogs or grab lunch, like, we need the work done at a really quality level. And that's why you're here. I would have never had the audacity to do that myself without getting, even though I wanted to, and I was like, can I try it? But the permission to allow me to do it
Yeah.
was what put me on that different path, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think the segue there is, we talked about this on Monday too. There's only so much a company can do for its employers, right?
Yeah.
But the employees have a role in this too. And this is a debate that I have been witness of at multiple C-suites in the last few months. This idea of, we do a lot of engagement surveys at Velocity, and the readouts are always interesting because this year there was a decline across the board in most employers' engagement surveys. And a lot of it is tied to these things. It's people feel overworked, they feel stressed, they don't have enough resources, they aren't clear on the decisions that are being made. There's too much change happening in the system. Now I got AI I got to deal with, and how is that going to impact my job in the future? That's just one component
Mhm.
of 8 other things
Right.
that are coming at them. And when a lot of the comments that we see in these surveys are all about, there's too much change and I can't keep up with it. PwC just put out a global report, and they did a lot around this idea of too much change, and a lot of people are starting to say, why are we changing to change?
Hmm. Hmm.
That's how it feels to the ecosystem when leaders start making really random decisions. Well, why are they making these decisions? It's because the market's changed. Our work has changed. There's uncertainties in the world, right?
Yeah.
That we have to combat with. 2024 has not been an easy sales year for anybody,
Right.
unless you're in one industry, and that's construction, and they seem to be doing just fine. But everybody else is like, these sales cycles get longer and longer and longer. And so in the absence of activity, I hear this word a lot, activity, the leadership team's like, well, let's go try this and let's go try this and let's go do this. And what if we did this for a little bit? And oh, can you tap this person to go do that? They're running at levels that you can't sustain, to be
Right.
honest.
Right.
But when you look at what the leadership team sets at the top is what people think the expectation is. Even if you have a policy, we talked about this,
Yeah.
that has unlimited PTO. I love this example, right? We give our employees unlimited PTO. Great. How many people have used it? Well, people take a day here or a day there. And then we ask, well, if you had people actually count up how many days they used in a year, how many is it? Non-company sponsored holidays, 5 to 7.
Mhm.
Because unlimited PTO by nature, most people just don't use it.
Yeah.
And so then they ask the question, well, why don't people use it more? Right? It's a benefit we give them. Well, senior leader, how much vacation did you take?
Yep. 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 Yep.
Oh, well, I don't need to take vacation because, my work is my life. Okay, well, if that's the message you're sending, how do you think 4 levels beneath you feels when they go to take PTO and then like, well, no one else is taking it? So maybe I really don't have unlimited PTO. Maybe I shouldn't. I'm just going to take a Friday.
Yeah.
And then we come back to burnout and fatigue, where people are stressed out, they don't have enough time, they can't find balance. And it's all because there's these unspoken expectations that the leaders don't even often know they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when we do these readouts, they'll ask the question like, but we have all these like great options in place, but no one's using them. You have to mirror it from the top.
Right.
And until you encourage people and actually ask them, hey, what are you taking off this year? I have an employee who he's been with us for almost 2 years. And I remember he was like, well, I think I'm gonna, just take a 2 day long weekend with my family. And I was like, wrong answer. You're taking a week. So
Yeah.
what week in the summer are you gonna take?
Yeah.
And I want you to delete your email off your phone. Just get the whole velocity system out of it. I don't want you responding to anything.
Mhm.
If it's urgent, I'll text you, but I want you on vacation. And I do the same thing when I go. I don't respond to things. I go silent unless something urgent happens, right? I often say, don't call me unless something's literally on fire,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And the more we mirror that for people at the top, the more they'll start to be comfortable to do the things that we're like, we give you the opportunity to do this. You're just not taking advantage of it. And then we blame the employee for not doing what we ask them to do.
Right. It's that I'm a big like actions transcend words type of thing. It's the who we are is what we repeatedly do, not what we say we'll do. And so we did have a question come in from Alex Koval, who is an HR data partner, and the question was, what is one piece of advice you would give to a leader trying to create more balance for their team? And I think you just walked through a lot of that. I think, and I'm going to give a short answer here, but I am curious to know your thoughts. For me, the biggest difference that I've seen in teams that do this really well is that one-to-one understanding of what the person needs.
Yeah.
There's the team structure, and if you have 8 people, if you have 80 people, if you have 3 people, understanding the team structure and setting the example from the top, but then actually getting to that one-to-one level and knowing, what is going to make this individual tick, what is going to make this individual like really get into a flow, what is going to make them not. And I use this example so poorly all the time, but I am the literal worst at like busy work. I love it, but if I have to do it for more than 2 hours in the same seat,
Mm-hmm.
we were just talking about the walking treadmill before we hopped online. Maybe that's why I do need it. But if I'm here and I am just working for 3 hours straight, no meetings, no human interaction, and I'm going and I look at my calendar and there's another 3 hours of me having to do, the expense reports, the pipeline updates, all that stuff. If I don't leave right now and go do this at a coffee shop or at my house, I might spontaneously combust, right? And so like everybody at the office knows that that's the case. I've had
Yep.
that conversation with them, and now I don't feel like I don't have that pit in my stomach, like that guilt feeling
Yeah.
for doing that. But long answer to a really good question, Alex. But what are your thoughts
No,
on the thing that we can do here?
I think you teed it up really well, Alec, and I love what you said earlier. And I think it really does come down to, as a leader, hopefully you are having weekly one-on-ones with your people, even if it's
Yeah.
for 15 minutes. It doesn't have to be, a whole story of your life kind of thing, but your team needs to have time with you, because the fallacy is that the leaders are really busy. So I don't want to burden you with any more time. When in reality, it's like, but I actually need this time with you, because I can't get you to the next level of you
Yeah.
if I don't know how to help you get there. So sitting down one-on-one, and I love the question, and I use this a lot as well. When are you at your best? Have
Mhm.
them tell you a story of what really energizes them. Like, what gets them excited to get up in the morning and come to work? And then give them more things like that to do,
Yeah.
right? When we look at the research on fatigue and burnout, it's oftentimes not there's too much work. It's exactly what you just said. It's too much of the stuff that they don't want to do.
Hmm.
And then it builds and it builds and it builds until you've got 6 months of expense reports to do. Your pipeline hasn't been updated in 5 weeks, and everyone's yelling at you because it's like, Alec, where's all this business development, right? Well,
Yep.
I've done it. I just haven't put it in the system.
Exactly.
And you have to recognize, like, every person needs something different. And I'm not saying that we should make everybody snowflakes and make them feel like, we'll give you everything you want, but it's like, help me map out with you the things that you need to do your job better.
Mhm.
And then how do we create space for that? And that might mean reallocation of work to other people. That might mean different flexible schedules,
Mhm.
right? And that's when we talk about psychological safety is one of the topics that comes up a lot. If
Yeah.
people don't feel like they can ask those questions or be authentic in the response, because there's going to be a retaliation afterwards, they're just going to give you a cookie cutter, and they're going to continue to be miserable.
I I am believing every word that you and I have said for 42 minutes. And I'm gonna throw a huge caveat at you. Is I know that whether or not that individual or individuals would be watching content like this, I'm not sure. But I know that there is still a large percentage of people who happen to probably be employers or employees that may or may not be going through things like this. And they think that we are in the fairy world, right? Like we are in the make believe. And as somebody who is a huge believer of like business plans and track, all these different things that you have to have set up, what's the I don't know, what's the pushback that you get? And then what's the pushback that you have back to them about this? Like, that's not what we need to do. They're here to work. They are worker A, they are worker B, they are worker C. That's their job. We pay them to do that job. That's what they should do. And how do we balance all of that as like the employee? I mean, again, I asked this question with 17 minutes left. I know we're gonna have another one of these because there's also a really good question from Alyssa that's about more on the employer side that we can get to. But I'm gonna ask you this really loaded question anyway, Brooke.
Sure.
So what are your thoughts there?
Well, let's unpack it a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah, let's do
As
that. Let's
there's a
undress it a little
lot, there's
bit.
a lot to it. When I so there's a couple things that I find really fascinating right now, and it's something we teach in some of our programs is on manager versus leader, and theory X versus theory Y. And theory X leadership believes that employees only come to work to get a paycheck. So that's the pushback I'm starting to hear a little bit from some of the executive teams, because there's and I'm gonna probably be controversial for a minute, but I think there's fear in general of what life looks like for people. And when we live in a state of fear, and we live in a state of there's not enough, I'm not getting enough feedback from the system that people are going to buy or that we're going to grow. When there's a lot of fear, there becomes a scarcity mindset, which then means, well, in order for me to get what I want from you, I have to treat you like an employee because I'm paying you. But when we're in an abundance mindset, and like 2020, 2021 were rock star years, right? Especially in your industry.
Yeah.
It was like we couldn't keep up with the amount of work.
Right.
Let's go hire more people. And everybody was just excited because it was like, look at all this stuff that's coming in. And when you have this abundance mindset, all of a sudden it was like, well, we know people have a lot on their plates. We're going to give them flexibility in their job. Because now I don't believe you're showing up every day to just do a paycheck. I'm giving you purpose. I'm giving you something to do that drives your intrinsic motivation, and it also benefits the company. And I think what we're seeing is there's a shift happening right now. And this is the ebb and flow of business, right? You
Mhm.
have good years and you have not so good years. And whenever you do that as a leadership team, you have to recognize when the mindset shifts to we need to do layoffs because we don't have enough money to fund the STIP program, right? Or I have a board of directors that's asking me for cost reduction. I need to go hire a big consulting firm to do transformation work for us and look at all of our financials. People start to get nervous when they see that as like the idea or option that the company's doing, because a lot of times there's no internal marketing, there's no internal communication. It's just something being done to you,
Mhm.
right? Which
Mhm.
I know you guys help a lot with some of that stuff when it comes to, big org changes and
Yeah.
brand changes. And so I think part of it is just a mindset shift of leaders of what do you intrinsically think your employees are there for?
Yeah.
And if you're okay with having some bad months and some good months, but yet still keeping the human element part of it, I think all this starts to fade away. And people, the more that you treat people like humans and you ask them these questions of how do I engage you more? How do I give you the things that make you happy in your job? And I know a lot of people are like, don't talk about happiness and
I
work at the same time. I
yeah.
I get it. But there is an element of the more conversations like that you have, you focus less on the bad and more on the good. You start to see people um, inherently wanting to find new solutions. That's when you get the most innovation from your employees, is when they have this capacity to do something different and they
Yeah.
have time. And now they're like, oh, I love what I do. I want to make sure we're successful.
Right.
They come up with the best ideas, right? Versus this micromanaged, I'm going to just dictate what you do all the time. And then they're like, well, screw you. I'm only going to work 40 hours a week because it's what you pay me to do.
Right. And then that's where the quiet quitting, like that, and then it starts to snowball from
Mm.
there. And I think there was so much good in that. I did want to just say, because I love Alex and Jackie both left comments to your answers. Alex's comment back was the intrinsic, intrinsic is the magic word. And I think the magic word for me in your answer is the human part. I am a broken record talking about it's no longer B2B, it's H to H. And we've got an episode on the Scorecast and a LinkedIn Live later this summer with one of our clients talking about building a human first business. And it's
Yeah.
the humans that are doing the work, it's the humans that you want to work with. They're the ones, and I'm not and I am on record for this. I am not a company is family guy. But I
Mhm.
am a company is community guy, and
I
I
love
want to
that.
be friends with the people that I want to work with. I want to trust them that if I am going on vacation, I know that they're not going to blame me for going on vacation. They're going to want
Right.
me to go. They're going to help me if I need to, which I think is so important. And then Jackie had commented earlier, comparison is the thief of joy, and she really appreciated your comment about the balance looking different for everyone. And I think that is it's so important because when you were just talking about people wanting to have good ideas and they want to innovate, like I always joke that the best ideas that I have always come after work, and I
Yeah.
may or may not. My emails typically start with, "I apologize for the late email. I had two whiskeys and here we are."
Yeah.
And but when I do that, I know I'm in a really happy state
Mhm.
to be at my job, that I sat down at the kitchen table with
Yeah.
nothing on my mind and was eating. And then 5 minutes later, I'm typing an email. And that's like when I know that I feel really good about where I'm at, you know?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. We've got 10 minutes left here. This has been thrilling. And I know I'm gonna force you to come back. Like I just think that I know we're talking about doing a panelist one with some others within the industries, all that stuff. I've got two questions left. We're gonna do a recap question. I'll put you on the spot for 60 seconds, but I am curious in terms of let's take back some of that control. I think the word that you used was reclaim it on Monday when we were prepping for this, and I had kind of said that like calmly demand clarity. So, what are some things that someone's watching this, they love what they're hearing from you, and they say, "But I don't feel that right now." What are small action items,
Mhm.
takeaways that someone could try to implement at work and at home to help bring this to life a little bit?
Sure. So the first one I know we talked about this on Monday too, the aspect and idea of pausing.
Mhm.
So I'm going to ask everybody who watches this to carve out 1 hour in the next week where you can dedicate time to pause. Now that could be going on a walk with no stimulation,
Yeah.
right? Maybe it's just the headphones to keep it quiet so you can like listen to your breath. You can feel if you're in Nebraska, it's crazy hot. It's really crazy hot in Colorado right now, right? Like maybe you don't go outside, but can you pause just enough so that you can quiet the mind down so you can ask yourself the questions of what do you actually need? So I'm going to challenge everybody to take a pause in the next week, and then reflect on what helps you optimize work and yourself. So, are there things, and Alec, I know you had some examples, are there things that when you're at your best, you just do to help make the day better? So, for example, you get up at the same time every morning, you go to bed at a reasonable hour, you schedule breakfast, lunch, and dinner,
Yeah.
maybe even some snacks in there. You meal plan, right? Prep so that when you have, Alec, I have more nights than I can count anymore where I'm like, I'm so exhausted. The thought of cooking
Yep.
is going to send me over the edge. And I love to cook.
Yeah.
Like, it just makes me happy. And so then I'm like, well, what do I got in the cabinet? I've got chips and guac. That
Yep.
sounds pretty right.
Yep. That's exactly
And
right.
and then the next morning you wake up and you're like, I feel like crap, right?
Mhm.
And why do I, oh yeah, yesterday I ate protein bar and 6 cups of coffee and chips and guac. Like that's a real great place to put your body.
Yep.
So these little micro habits that we know we do, I think a lot of us had a lot of them pre-COVID, and working from home has kind of shifted that because you don't have to get in a car anymore and drive anywhere, right?
Right.
For most of us. And so thinking about what you could do that's easy that you can implement, and you may have a list of 10. I'm going to ask people to just do 2 because it'll get overwhelming if you try to do all 10. And then in a month, you add another. And then in a month, you add another. And then you start to come back to these natural habits that you have. And for those of you who are not good at setting boundaries, start setting boundaries,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
If you need your lunch break to go do stuff to give you clarity of mind and to just decompress, use your calendar and block your lunch and then hold to it. So you went down the path of the client, right? Like,
Yep.
what if a client calls between your 2 and 4? Clients come first. I'll always take the call, but I'll adjust the time so I
Yeah.
still get the 2 hours,
Right.
right?
Right.
And then the other one is if you have a boss who tends to run around and have lots of ideas and not give you clarity, I'd like to empower you to ask for clarity.
Yeah.
If you don't have one-on-ones with your boss, schedule one-on-ones,
Mhm.
10 minutes, and say, hey, you gave me X. I don't know what to do with this. Oh, and by the way, here's all the other things that I have on my plate. Which one comes off?
Yeah.
Ask for clarity, set boundaries. Don't be too rigid with it, right? There is fluidity to all of this,
Yeah.
But the more you start to do things like that, the more people understand, well, maybe we don't have enough resources, because now Alec is actually telling me he has 50 hours already when I thought he only had 30,
Right.
because I didn't know someone else had asked him to help with this and someone else has asked him to help with this. And those are the things I think that help bring some unstuckness, because now we're being intentional about how we move forward. We're being cognizant of the things that work for me, not for you.
Yeah.
And we're starting to put some habits in place again that help just fill your cup up a little bit more, because it's what makes you happy.
Yeah. I love that. And the concept of filling up the cup. One of the things that I've been doing recently is I've got this just awful little, like, there, it's a little notebook planner and it's just today's plan. Sometimes I don't fill it out in the morning, but I always try to fill it out by the end of the day to recap it. And listen, I can't say you should journal, because I journal once and then a month later I journal again. And then 3 months later I journal for 4 straight days. But sometimes this one literally just has the meetings that I have and then what I ate for dinner, how many glasses of water I had, and then I went on a dog walk and then kind of rate it, like
Yep.
5 out of 10, 7 out of 10, and or whatever it is. And so like that can give me like a little bit of that grounding in terms of like rating each day and realizing why, my back hurts and I feel 30 or whatever it is. Like that's kind of where I've been lately. The other thing that I was going to say is there's so much good content around this concept, and different books, all the things, just like four right out of the gate. And I think I've got three of them, maybe four of them right here. But Radical Candor, if you haven't read that as an individual or as an employer, Atomic Habits by James Clear is another great book, and that's what you were talking about. Do 2 out of 10, then add the third, and then add, habit stack. And then Greg McEwen has two books called Effortless, or
Mm.
yeah, Effortless and Essentialism. And it's really about that concept of filling up the cup. And so I think that those are all, like, again, I can't tell you to read if you're not a reader. Reading is one of the things that if I look at it and I say I've had a really bad month, I've been listening to music every chance that I have free time, or I've been playing a game on my phone or watching something on the TV. When I've been reading, I typically feel more in a group. So it's some of those little things that
Yeah.
that can make a difference too.
Yeah. Even carving
Um,
out time on the weekends, right? Stop feeling like it's selfish. If you need to
yeah,
take an hour or two and take a nap, guess what? You should take a nap. If your body's
yes.
tired, you should take a nap.
Yeah. I love that. I you can see right here. You see I don't know how to nap. That's a different problem, different podcast. I want to say thank you to everybody. We're not done yet because I am going to put Brooke and I both on the spot. For 60 seconds. I'm actually going to bring out the timer. And if you go over 60 seconds, I won't stop you, but I might like boo, or just like throw a little heckle your way.
Okay.
So I just want your final takeaway. I know we're going to do another one of these as people are watching. I think there's been a lot of interest, a lot of comments, a lot of commentary. I think we'll get more of those, so we'll send them each other's way. I do want people, if you are really passionate about this as an employer or as an employee, let us know. We want to make this kind of an ongoing conversation because I think it's super important. But with that said, 60 seconds takeaway, whatever you want, whatever direction you want to go in, and whenever you start, I'm going to hit the timer. Okay, are you
Okay,
ready?
I'm gonna do it too, so I stay on track.
I love that you're the first. I've done this for like 20 episodes and no one's done that, so I love
I was
that.
like, I don't know what 60 seconds looks like, so
I
let's do
love it.
this.
All
Okay.
right.
So key takeaways. All right. I think the big thing is fatigue is real,
Yeah.
and it's okay to say you're fatigued or tired or exhausted or burnout. If you can claim it and own it, you're one step closer to fixing the problem.
Yeah.
It's when we don't talk about it or acknowledge it that it becomes an issue. So fatigue is real. Find moments to pause, right? The only way we slow down is to do it ourselves. No one's going to do it for you. If you're an employer and you have people giving you feedback in an engagement survey that they're tired and need more help, sit down with them and ask them how.
Yeah.
Don't just let them give you the feedback and do nothing with it. And if you do an engagement survey and you don't do anything with the feedback you get, stop doing engagement surveys.
Yeah.
If you feel tired at work, build better boundaries and ask yourself those questions. When am I most effective? What gives me the most joy? And what can I do to optimize time to make my life better? Okay.
I love it. I have a minute and 8 seconds, but it was very good. Are you prepared to time me now?
Yes, I
Okay.
am.
Okay. I think my big two takeaways at the employee and the employer level for one is, and I wrote an article about this last year, is who do you want to be? Not what job do you want to be? What role
Mm.
do you want to be in? I think it goes to Alex's question about, what can a team manager do? From the very beginning, we should be asking that question. But if you didn't get the opportunity to ask that question or you didn't interview the person, reset that now. Who do
Mhm.
we want to be in 3 years? I don't want to hear a job title. I don't want to hear X, Y, and Z. I don't want to hear a salary. I want to hear what type of person do you want to be? And I think that's really important. And then the second thing is, and this might be the harshest thing that I say in 15 seconds, but you are responsible for this as an individual. And you have to take that. And if other people judge you for it, or you feel guilty because of it, or the people that you work with or your family friends are unfair about that, that's going to be a learning curve for them. But you have to do that yourself, or no one else will do that with you.
Yep.
I went over. Now I can't make fun of anybody for any other.
You
I've
went
never
over by
gone.
like 3 seconds. I think it's okay.
Gosh. Okay. Well, if you have any thoughts, comments about this, throw them in the section. I am super thankful to you, Brooke. You are fantastic. I'll share where people can find you in the follow up to this post, but I think that they'll be seeing you again on the LinkedIn Live, because I think the synergy here and the conversation is fantastic. And I even saw a comment already. Life has lived in the pause has really resonated with me since you said it at the beginning of this. And so I'm glad that there are some action items that are already being taken away. Brooke, I just want to say thank you one more time for spending the Wednesday and giving us an hour of your time. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Anytime. I do this anytime.
Awesome.
Thank you.